Begüm Acar from Sugender, and for the announcements and arrangements as well. Okay, and welcome everyone. And it's a very big pleasure for me to announce my dear friend, who's also a very good social anthropologist, Dr. Sertaç Sehlikoğlu, and her book talk. And let me just say a few words about Sertaç and her book, which I read and enjoyed it a lot. And I thought it's a very important book, pertinent on the issues on gender identity, especially in current Turkey, current social political dynamics in Turkey. Okay, Dr. Sertaç Sehlikoğlu is a senior research associate at the University College London Institute of Global Prosperity. She's a social anthropologist specialized in gender and subjectivity in the Middle East and Islamicate context. She has studied, conducted research, and taught at Boğaziçi University, Concordia University in Montreal, the University of Toronto in Toronto, and the University of Cambridge. She is currently the primary investigator of an ERC, European Research Council starting grant on imagination and politics. And her book, Working Out Desire, Women Support Sport and Self-Making in Istanbul, explores spor merakı, and I really like the fact that Sertaç left it in Turkish, which can be loosely translated as interest in or passion for sports in current times among Istanbulite women with various different socioeconomic and demographic backgrounds. And her nuanced and colorful descriptions of various milieus of sports, such as women-only gyms, and the narratives of women's interactions in those milieus show us, state that those women engaging sports means, for them, sports mean not only exercising to stay fit, lose weight, or to be healthy, but also sparing a crucial time and place for just for themselves, shaping and reshaping and negotiating their identities and subjectivities. Okay, so I leave the floor to dear Sertaç Sehlikoğlu and for a book talk. Please, Sertaç, go ahead.
Thank you, Ayşecan, for honoring me with this book talk and for your incredibly kind words and warm introduction. I'm deeply humbled. And thank you, Aslı and Begüm, for the background work in organizing today. I'm again deeply humbled by both the invitation and the interest amongst the audience. So yes, I'm a social anthropologist and I enjoy carrying two main tasks in my scholarship. First, I focus on the intangible aspects of human subjectivity that connects the individuals at deeper and less visible ways. And for this aim, I have worked on desire, aspirations, and self-making. And now I'm focusing on imaginaries, imagination. And second, I enjoy ethnographically revisiting the concepts that are used in theory too much, a little bit too much, to the extent of losing their meanings. So I revisited the terms like agency, intimacy, and I think imagination can also go into that category, to ethnographically ground them and to question the social theory that tends to move towards abstraction and lose sight of the everyday realities. My geographical focus for the last 13 years has been the Middle East, mostly Turkey, and the last 3 years, well, now 4 actually, I started expanding my focus to the Balkans. So I will talk with a couple of visuals with you, and let us check if I have passed the huge challenge of dealing with multiple screens. Can you see me and the screen? Cool.
Yes.
So I start my every book talk by underlining that it's an ethnographic account of women's desires, which actually Ayşecan introduced very, very neatly. But before I move forward, I need you to stop and think about how a researcher can study desire, like ethnographically. So desire, we are thinking it like an anthropologist, ethnographer, and desire is not like kinship or ritual or one of the topics that anthropologists study like traditionally. Neither it's a very tangible reference, right? So on the contrary, there are two main challenges in studying something so intangible like desire. First challenge is, of course, its intangibility, as I said. The second one is relativity, that desire is a product of social and historical as well as economical processes, and thus who can desire what and how is very culturally and temporally specific. So studying desire ethnographically is quite a challenge. I needed to find a way to turn this task into a methodologically meaningful process. And I did this by tracing an object of desire. The urban trend of spor merakı, which, as we mentioned, it can loosely translated as interest or maybe curiosity in sports, which enjoys, okay, I think it's the next slide here. Hold on. There, which enjoys a large following, right? Among over 1.5 million women in Istanbul. When I'm speaking to a Western audience, I also explain that spor merakı is not like exercise trend or exercise craze in the Western sense as used in English. Neither it's descriptive, not unlike how men refer to their exercise as doing sports or lifting weights or having a match and running. In my work, I look at the ways in which Istanbulite women use spor merakı as a tool to manifest their desiring selves. So that will be important. As women do with many other objects of desire, in the case of exercise, they often undersell their yearnings and aspirations, presenting the latter as simply interest or innocuous curiosities. To appreciate the distinctiveness of Istanbulite women's spor merakı, like many anthropologists, I follow women's own words and use their language as a gateway to their imaginations. But of course, for something to be turned into an object of desire, that's also crucial, it must have some sort of significance in that particular context. And sports was providing a perfect lens. As we know, sports has been used by the Republican Turkey as a tool for transformation from the 1930s and onwards. Beginning from 1930s, the Republican Nationalist Project of Turkey has promoted exercise to create a new, healthy, Western civilized bodies, right? They have implemented compulsory physical education classes and initiated annual youth and sport festivals. You can see the photos from such festivals from various years. The state-forced investments have marked women's involvement in sport as an elite activity on the one hand. On the other hand, simultaneously, it had a double-edged sword relationship with the normative femininity, right? So bodily movements associated with sports and exercise, such as running and jumping, are considered juvenile, therefore a threat to ideal femininity. And the same movements were also objects of sexual control and sexual harassment. That's the double-edged sword part. Of course, the contrast between expectations of the state and of the social norms both heavily gendered and created tension. As a result of this tension, even after Turkey's decades-long investments, what we were seeing in 1980s, 50 years later, was that there was a public resistance when it comes to women's and girls' participation in sports. The compulsory physical education classes in high schools had been famously opted out by girls with the help of the fake medical reports and the gymnastics performances of the annual youth and sports fest celebrations, where girls and boys paraded in shorts, have always been a matter of public anxiety, right? And Istanbulite women's spor merakı, however, does not reflect the republicanist ideology. However, neither it does reflect an immediate fit to the normative expectations. So yes, by the time I started my research, the middle-aged Istanbulite women who went walking in the parks had already become city legends known as sporcu teyzeler, sporty aunties. And I do start my book with an eulogy to them. While the outdoor gyms replacing playgrounds and public parks were strange to the majority of the Istanbulites, they were nevertheless swiftly discovered by the middle-aged women, often wearing long robes and large headscarves. The contrast between the unfit, joyful, ordinary, covered, and ordinary, I think, is the right word, and the covered bodies of Istanbul's sporty aunties, and the fit, disciplined, serious, less covered, and elite bodies of the early Republican sportswomen sort of form the kind of heart of this research. I'm going to play something. Is there a sound? I hope there's a sound. These contrasts present one of the few occasions where the veil drawn over women's agentive desires become relatively more transparent and can be captured ethnographically speaking. And I tried to study this multi-layered and admittedly very colorful design cells of Istanbulite women in my book. Spor merakı connects a diverse body of women to one another as a collective object of desire. What does this connection tell us about the formations of an object of desire as a question? I think we can respond to this question by stating how the book studies the connections amongst women according to a three-angle approach: through gendered self, through space, which would be mostly Istanbul, but other elements of space also emerges, and through perspectives of time, neoliberal times. This three-angled approach then also determines the organization of the book, as you can see. And I ended up dividing the book into these three parts where I address each one of these elements, right? Self, space, and time. And also taking a feminist approach, I refuse to simply see Istanbulite women as mindless followers of a neoliberal trend, which I can open up with the questions. Rather, I develop a multi-layered analysis on how women use spor merakı to manifest a desiring self that takes them out of domestic zone physically, emotionally, and also imaginatively. This project and the extensive fieldwork have allowed me to develop a new approach vis-a-vis a number of classic and contemporary themes in the anthropology of the Middle East. It has led me to formulate desiring self-making, which is what I end up formulating across the book. I use the concept of desire as a way to gloss a wide range of aspirations and needs and longings. So the desire in this book is beyond the moment it is felt, therefore, beyond the moment it's experienced or even yearned for. It is formed through a series of social and historical makings. And I formulate desire as a human capacity to seek new possibilities and the ability to dream and fantasize, all of which are not only aspects of subjectivity, but also are deeply rooted in human agency, right? It is this agentive capacity of desiring selves that enables women to transform the meanings and categories that limit their bodies physically, temporally, and spatially towards the formation of a collective trend. Spor merakı is the product of their ability to act against multiple and often opposing norms when you think about it. Not by challenging them directly, which is another element of their agentive processes, but by fooling and emptying them. And in contrast to resistance, this particular type of agency is purposefully unthreatening and thus often divergent, veiled, and left unenunciated. And of course, because of those elements, this type of agency often escapes from ethnographic gaze and from the anthropological inquiry. and before I wrap up, I'd like to finish with one of the things I have found important to address towards the end of my project, right? And I do this with this visual. I love this image, this painting by Layla Shawa, the Gaza-born Palestinian artist, because it helps me to think visually about how we often imagine the combination of desire and women who also happen to be Muslim, and the way we can't find, we as kind of this Eurocentric mind, we don't find these two compatible somehow. That and I use this after a number of experiences while I was trying to present different parts of my work, and I realized not really getting there is this response that suggests a full understanding of the content of the project, right? It was suggesting a particular type of mindset. The responses I was receiving was suggesting a particular type of mindset that suggests Islam is something that brings veil to women, and desire is always to be seized and consumed, and otherwise it melts away, right? And my interlocutors are actively creating a space and time and terminology for their desires and their desiring selves, who, by the way, are simultaneously Muslims and women, and they're also citizens of Turkey and residents of Istanbul, which suggests other elements of their subjecthood, all at once, right? There's this richness in their subject positioning. And I love this image. It kind of, as soon as I see this, it was really good in summarizing the mindset I was trying to deal with while I was presenting different parts of my book. As a wrap up, I can say that the book is not an ethnographic account of women exercising across Istanbul. Rather, it's an ethnographic account of the formation of desiring subjectivities, the human capacity to desire that's not only informed and shaped by socio-historical constraints, but also marked in its agentive aptitude. And desiring subjectivity is something that's rooted in aspirations, in fantasy, and in anticipation within and beyond the realms of sex and sexuality. So when you're reading the book or hearing different parts of it, you might as well see resemblances in other parts of our lives, you know, where we actively manifest our desiring selves by using other tools other than spor, merakı. So I will stop here, I think. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sertaç, for this really nice book talk, actually, which didn't only give information about the book, but which made, I'm sure, the audience eager to read the book as well. You're giving us some glimpses from different parts of the book. So are there any questions, comments? You can either raise your hands from the reactions, or since we're a small group, you can just jump in and, you know, tell your comments, questions.
Hello, can I start?
Sure. Yes, Marabou.
Hi, sorry, I'm not opening my video.
Problem.
I'm not as presentable right now, but thank you very much for your talk, Sertaç, Dr. Sertaç. My name is Marhabo, and I'm a researcher at Sabancı University, Sucanda right now, and I'm working on migration project there. I just wanted to say that I really enjoyed your book talk, and also I'm really looking forward to reading it, because I think myself is one of the women who are desiring workout since for 3 years, and it's been transformative for me. I'm doing kickboxing, and it is kind of very much and after this talk, I'm going to kind of a jiu-jitsu self-defense class, also kind of designed mostly for women. And
because,
I think
because it's already scheduled, right? Not because of
it's already scheduled. I have 4 sessions scheduled, and I'm really interested because there are different sports or MMA kind of. So like my question is more about like, how did you do this ethnography? As you said, like desire, it's not very, you know, attainable in that sense, but you theorized it very well, like by following the object of desire. But I am also interested in the process of kind of like documenting it or ethnographically. And another one is kind of like, for me personally, my desire of like kickboxing or boxing or savunma sporları, my interest in this, it was mostly also to find a community of women who are in this. So I'm interested in whether there was such an interest of you know, among this middle-aged women who were trying to find this community, or were there like community building practices specifically?
Those are perfect questions. Thank you. Exactly the points I wanted to address.
Yes, thank you. But I'm really looking forward to reading it because it's very much like close to my heart personally, and also kind of I want to develop more of a project on more of an intersections of this women, migration, and sport, because I think there is a kind of also there needs to be kind of interventions in those. And I am really interested how to do it anthropologically.
Thank you for your kind words as well, Amarable. So methodology bit is very important. Thank you for asking this question. I actually divided my ethnographic fieldwork into 3 parts. So I spent an entire year, obviously, in Istanbul, well, slightly less than a year, because at one point I had to go to London because London Olympics was taking place, and I didn't know if there would be anything significant that might happen, like significant to the research that might happen during that time. I ended up writing about that, but it didn't enter the book, the Olympics part. Anyway, so I divided the fieldwork into 3 parts. But before I say, I want to say, I wasn't aware that the project would end up being about desire. That's one of the things we need to, as anthropologists and ethnographers more generally, we need to be very open and slightly also confident about letting the fieldwork take us away. Because when we are coming to fieldwork, and remember, I was a PhD candidate back then. When you are a PhD candidate, you are more like eager to address whatever the dominant discussion is at your time, right? And in the academic circles. So you want to. So I was encouraged to address questions of piety and body, actually, because it was time of Sabah Mahmoud, and piety and pious self-making was the thing. And then I came to the field and I realized, like, this is not the space to study piety at all, right? I mean, what is like, piety was actually a term anthropologists were using to sound almost politically correct when they were writing and thinking about Muslims overall. And that was also another problematic thing that was creating another problematic term. I end up writing about that later on. So one of the things that was quite dominant, and then I was thinking, maybe it's about weight loss, right? It's about this kind of neoliberal thirst to become more fit and this and that. And then and I was like taking notes nonstop. Before I opened this up, actually, I divided my fieldwork period into 3 steps. The first step, 1/3, like about 3 to 4 months, 3.5 months, I didn't interview anyone. I was just taking field notes, participant observation, but also like what we were taught as simple observation at Boğaziçi University, right? Just writing down whatever you hear. And I ended up having hundreds of pages that's full of hop, turn, like, you know, these kind of rhythms. And then I ended up writing all about the rhythms as well. So participant observation and simple observation. And then I started interviewing with people I befriended in that first 3 months. And then in the 3rd part, I was interviewing either people for the second time or organizing focus groups or interviewing with people who were not my main research participants, but those who were mentioned by my main research participants. So again, by that time, I was clear that this research is about desire. And I was asking, because I was also asking people, what made you come here? You know, how did you become interested in Pilates and yoga and this and that? And people were name dropping. And these names were often, you know, characters from TV, right? So I was interviewing with Ebru Şallı, Sabah Tümer, all these kind of, yes, big names. So these are the kind of methodological design. But going back to taking notes and how these simple observation and personal observation period has changed my focus and really made me realize how I should change my focus is best signified with this anecdote, I think, that I'm taking notes and normally, you know, in Istanbul, the first two questions people ask to each other is, where are you from? And maybe where do you live, or how many kids you all have, something like that. At the gyms, especially in the changing rooms, that's not the case. At the gyms, women were asking to each other for, how long have you been coming here? And how many kilos have you lost? Okay. And my very, I think, problematically trained mind was assuming that, women are asking these questions to each other because they are so determined to fit the ideals of a particular look, etc. Except weeks and months were passing and nobody's shape was changing. Nobody was losing any weight. And as funny as it sounds, I realized later on, the more familiar I became with the field, the better I realized the questions are not meant for women to set up targets in their mind. The questions were asked to each other to convince themselves that all these ideals that were marketed on TV, that were presented in various media outlets, were unrealistic. So they come to the gym to see the real women, to see the real possibilities, and unconvince themselves to look like Ebru Şallı. Instead, okay, here is this woman who's coming here and losing some real weight, but not too much. So she's the ideal for me. So there was another agentive process. So agency and desire became much more meaningful after I let the field shape my talks. And all of a sudden, as soon as I centralized desire in the research and in the ethnography, which was probably midway through the field work, I realized everything started making sense. All these, you know, as soon as I tell people that I do research and at the gyms with women, etc., like ordinary people, like lay people, were immediately telling me how those women are so self-conflicting because they exercise and afterwards they eat börek and have tea parties, whatsoever, etc. But when you centralize desire, it all makes sense. Of course, they would do that, and they would feel less guilty, maybe. But it's not about just, you know, it's not how we expect those. So their purpose is not what we expect them to carry, right? That the kind of, we were imposing some purpose to them, and it wasn't really their purpose most of the time, really large majority of the time. So the methodological part can lead me to talk about more like other aspects, but I'm going to stop myself there. About the second element of your question, the community, yes, definitely. The community is extremely crucial. And, but I have to open this up with the following note, that first of all, 75% of the female population in Turkey are housewives. Okay, so we need to first understand this, that as soon as you are a housewife, your time and your relationships are monitored in a particular way, right? Of course, our time is monitored in a particular way when we are working 9 to 5 as well. But I'm trying to give a picture. Most of these women that I was interviewing with were living either in close proximity in their neighborhoods with their relatives or in-laws, or if not, they at least have some neighborhood activity going on around them. When they come to the gym, they're slightly freed from those all these obligations that are coming with the family, with the neighborhood, and they can connect with another part of themselves. So they still have to be good wives and good housewives, like the person who cooks XYZ the best, the one who tidies home the best, etc. in their neighborhood. But at the gym, they can be something else and someone else. So when we say community, we also need to understand the sense of community that they are trying to establish by going outside of their kind of already existing communities, right? Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, comments? You can just jump in or raise your hand in reactions.
Maybe I can ask a question, Aisha.
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for an energizing talk, Sertaç. That was wonderful to hear. I didn't have a chance to read the book, but I remember reading an article, though not about gyms, but about public parks and how after the municipality installed those, workout equipment, more and more women, pious or veiled women, began to come out into the public space and use those equipment. So my question, I guess, is one about urban space and how, public parks figure into these, desiring selves, the existence of these public parks, and also about class, perhaps. How does class, figure into what desire you can follow or not? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, two excellent questions, and thank you for your kind words. So I ended up writing an entire chapter specifically about Istanbul because of this important issue going on, not only about public parks, but about this kind of interactive process where Istanbul's problematic, very concrete base, very cement based rebuilding or alteration is encountered with women's bodies, loosely put. Okay, and I had a chance to do a short ethnographic fieldwork in 2008, which was the year the municipal government started installing these kind of parks and also walking tracks. It all started with the walking tracks. I don't know if you remember or not. This kind of tartan tracks. Tartan is this kind of rubber-like material. And that was because women had already started walking around, right? So we need to see this as some sort of an interplay. The city is becoming more and more concrete, and most of the individuals living in Turkey are already from outside of Istanbul, right? They're already either the second generation or the first generation Anatolians or Balkan residents. So they come from more rural areas overwhelmingly. Or if not, even if they kind of grew up in Istanbul, they had the chance to experience Istanbul that was more enjoyable to experience, I think, right? So women, it was women who started this process, right? And the power municipal governments had over women was to try to see their demands as something that can be turned into profit, I guess, right? And the outdoor gyms is part of these series of projects. And they ended up transforming the parks where kids were playing into spaces where individuals can exercise. And they were also trying to fulfill all these kind of Republican ideals because Sports Incorporation, Sports AŞ, actually was built by the secularist municipal government, right? I think Nurettin Sözen first erected it to create healthy Istanbulites, right? And then first Refah and then AKP, it was first Erdogan himself actually, started adapting it for their very populist ideals, right? Okay, so if it is for this, then we are going to do this for people, okay? So there was this neoliberal interplay between the way the city was being re-established based on women's trends. But there was a second part in your question about Istanbul. I think I didn't take full note of it.
No, I was also asking about class, but with
that was the second question. Do you have a second part in the first question?
No, I think you answered it already.
Okay. All right then, because I feel like there is also something else that's to be mentioned. Anyway, it will come back later on, and I will mention. When it comes to class, the way I understand the interconnections between desire, design selves, and class is very much similar to the consumption practices actually that we are having, right? So everybody like wants something. We need to understand how desire is very socially and historically shaped. So, but then the way it's turned into a consumption is operated through class, if it makes sense. So when it comes to spor merakı, I have interviewed and met with and interviews with women who were going to what they called free sessions at the gyms owned by the municipal governments. Free gyms were back then, free sessions back then meant like paying 10 Turkish liras for a period of 3 months. And that was to cover the card expense, and that's it. But then they still had to purchase sneakers. So they would either get them from bazaars, or they would use each other's pair of sneakers, or they would use the public parks, and they would replace all these. Or if you were wealthy enough, you would show this in your outfits, right? You would have the best quality sports gear that will, regulate your sweating, that will kind of reduce your body temperature, that will do this and that. So the consumption processes would determine and shape class. But the way spor merakı is emerging, that's why it's useful to understand operations of desire, is more like across cultures, if that makes sense. Similar to the way we consume other things or we follow other forms of desire, right? Whenever something becomes trendy, you would find lower grade versions of them in bazaars and different platforms, and they would there would be fake brands. There's a really nice work by Magda Krasjun who works on fake brands, and she also has a separate really good discussion about that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sertaç. Any other questions? Yes, Deniz.
Thank you, Dr. Sehlikoğlu, for your talk. It's very interesting. I especially admire the focus on the ordinary, like the day-to-day existence of people, and especially also in the leisure area where people don't really pay too much attention. In Turkey, in Middle East as well. My question, I think, comes, it's also somehow a methodological question. And I think it comes from my own experiences on working with, exercising people in a way. But coming from political science, I didn't really have the tools to think about this too much. And so I'm wondering, how, you actually thought, I mean, there's, of course, a huge literature about it, but I was wondering how you dealt with it or how you thought about it. And this is the kind of the relationship between basically the physicalness, I mean, the materiality of the exercising body. I mean, there's of course, leisure, joy, etc. These they are related to the physical body, but there's also the discourse of talking about it, which is, related to the self-making, the subjectivity making. And and of course, there's the third level, which is the community, which, as you were talking about, which people admire. And that's why they also participate in this. But I was I was wondering whether you were able to kind of talk about or kind of maybe disentangle this liberating effect of the physicalness itself, maybe, or the joy of the movement itself, and whether that actually played a role. And how you were able to maybe, again, disentangle that from the way people talk about it, or whether we can, if that makes sense.
Another great question. Thank you so much, Deniz Hocam. So I want to start with actually how these certain discourses about health were initially sort of an obstacle, like methodological obstacle in my research. When you're trying to tap into people's enjoyable time for research purposes, as a person who came from the UK, and most of the people I talked to didn't care about the UK or Cambridge bit. They cared more about the yabancı ülke bit, the foreign land bit, right? And you are obviously, with the way you use Turkish, you're obviously a more educated person. So they have this kind of element of stress. So when you are asking them, why do you come to the gym? And they try to remember the names of the hormones they should care about, which is not the main purpose that drives them there, actually. But they don't want to sound, I don't know, ignorant or lower, or so you have to really make people very comfortable, maybe tap into the rhythm of the conversation. And I remember even at one point, I forgot how I was responding to people before the field work, because I had to do interviews with different type of people from various classes. And I was like trying to make them feel comfortable, which really, really deeply tortured my actual, how shall I say, relationality, I suppose. So I'm going to come to the physical part. So the physical part has these kind of biological elements. But I also found that there is a temporal element that was much more significant for women. And I ended up dedicating an entire chapter to that temporal part. By temporal, what I mean is the very rhythm you experience when you go to the gym and you exercise with other women around you, and you are sweating together, and you are changing your physical, like, internal rhythm together, and it has a liberating effect. And I think it's one of these things that women feel very joyful about. And I do discuss how they were kind of trying to explain this inexplicable joy, is the phrase I use in the book, how they try to explain this in different words, and they can't explain it really, right? And how they explain why they chose this particular type. So I'm asking, of course, they are going to different classes in that sports center. And I'm asking, why did you choose this over that? And why did you go to spinning? There was no, or instead of Pilates, why did you go to Pilates instead of this? And they all give references to their internal rhythms they feel they have due to their personalities, which was like a very helpful way to think about the way people want to connect with themselves to get out of what was imposed of them, specifically temporally, right? I then also put this, juxtapose this with the time regimes that are operating on their bodies, and speak about those time regimes as well, speak about their daily routines that were imposed on them. So there's this element that helps me to think more closely on enjoyment through the ethnographic material that was provided to me in the field.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sertaç. Any other questions, comments?
Can I?
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So sorry, Berna. I didn't see you raise your hand. Yeah, Berna, and then Ayşegül. Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for this really interesting subject. And we always see it as women doing sports, and it's really nice to see someone did a research about it and come up with some like really interesting analysis. I was thinking about the notion of desire, and as I didn't read the book, I couldn't wrap it in my mind. Like I couldn't really understand why it's about desire. It might be a very basic, simple question, but I really want to hear more about it, because like I was trying to follow from your answers, like what is this desire about, right? It's about sports, as I don't know, you will answer, but I was like, it's not about losing weight. It's not about this and that, like you just said that it's not about this, it's not about that. Then I was wondering, what is it about then? Like what kind of desire is it? And Yeah, and I mean, the notion of desire is very complicated, especially when it comes to the studies of Middle East, right? Mm-hmm. And women's position in this literature, right? John Scott, she says like how Muslim women, I mean, like the whole Orientalist literature is built on this notion of like Orientalist literature, right? Women of the Orient as desiring, I mean, they're represented as highly sexualized, right? Mm-hmm. And desire there is not something that is suppressed. But then when we come to today, like John Scott, she writes about it, like how in the French Revolution, women of Middle East was represented as in a sexualized way. But today we see Muslim women, they are represented with the discourse of suppression. And now this time, in the past, when the French woman was, represented as silent, quiet, moral, like while Middle Eastern women, they are sexualized, amoral. And today we see that Muslim women are, covered, suppressed, while French women are open, sexually available, right? So it's this always, the notion of desire is always like, take place in different forms in Orientalist discourse.
Yeah, and somehow we can't escape the masculinist tone in either of those distinct.
Yeah, it's really like very tricky, right? So it's really hard to write about it when you say that women have desire, right? So it's really hard I was thinking about it, like what kind of desire is it, like how to write about it? Maybe you can tell more about that, because like also the audience, right? Today's audience, they want to maybe see like Muslim women having desires, right? It's just so complicated to get out of this Eurocentric and Orientalist discourse, even in academia. So I wonder like how you wrote about it and how you define what is desire in this context.
And not only just in academia, right? It's also the kind of public gaze. And the very first book talk I have given was not to the academic circles, actually. It was organized by this woman who was formerly working at the BBC and was now living in the US, organizing these kind of podcasts. And when she saw the title of the book, she thought the book is about women's denied sexual desires or something, which wasn't the case. And I realized that from her questions, and then I had to start with explaining how it's not about analyzing women's desires, but it's about understanding how women use various tools, in my case, spor merakı, but in other cases that would be other tools probably, use various tools to manifest their desiring selves. Okay, so that's the full answer to your question when I'm opening this up, which is exactly why the title of the book is Working Out Desire, right? It's not just, but women actually work this out. It's not, and when we are thinking about this, one of the first things I kind of feel I need to also open up a little bit. When we think about women and desire in Turkey, we are thinking, and also the ordinary woman, right? We kind of realize that their desires are denied so systematically and so deeply. When women try to connect with their own desires, they end up feeling selfish, and they don't want to feel selfish, right? We are thinking about a context where a kind of when a boy wants to have something, he needs to have it because a boy's desire has to be always nurtured, right? And it's attached to his masculinity, so it's very crucial. Whereas a girl's desire has to be disciplined all the time. What kind of a psychoanalytical process this would create? How deeply it would disconnect women from their desiring selves. That's very crucial. And that's exactly with this kind of, in the study, that's exactly what I was discovering, actually. I'm asking women questions. So why do you do sports? This woman I'm giving an example from, she's now over 60. And back then she was over 55, I guess. She's saying, well, I'm just, oil on the arm. I'm just, keeping myself busy. And if you are not a careful ethnographer, you can just use this as a data and move on. But you can see the food she prepared. She's very busy. I mean, the food she prepared to me was like, it was all time-consuming dishes. And she already had told me about her grandchildren, that she has to, go across the city to take care of her grandchildren and come back. She's not somebody who's like a retired military man and needs to occupy herself, needs to find something that she needs to occupy herself with. No, she's not keeping herself busy. She doesn't have much time left to keep herself busy, but she's using this language for a particular strategy. So I further ask, what do you mean, Oyalanıyorum? What do you mean you are keeping yourself busy? You are already very busy, you do this and that. And then the more, and I do this, of course, very gently, the more you speak, at one point she admits, I'm keeping myself busy with myself. Kendimi kendimle oyalıyorum. And that's new. See? And in the same interview later on, which is, again, all in the book, in the same interview, she also reveals all these, when we think about ordinary women, we are not trying to find, or we can find still, but it's not always the case. They actively perform a resistance against what's imposed on them. They find alternative ways. They undersell their what they want to do. They undersell not only so that they won't be controlled, they also undersell because of the particular psychological processes I mentioned. They don't want to feel selfish. They want to say, oh, this is enough that I have served for you my entire life. I want to serve to myself. They don't say that, but they say in different words. Okay, so these are the processes that I was focusing on. It was like ghost chasing at one point. But then the more, it's one of the beauties of ethnographic research, the more people you speak with, the more patterns you then realize these patterns are telling you something that you don't want to miss. Okay, so in a nutshell, I can talk about this, quite long, but in a nutshell, the use of language was quite telling, and it's immediately related to the way desire itself is formulated in this particular geography, right? And in very gendered ways. And one of the tasks I need to deal with, and I'm coming to the feminist literature bit actually, and because I think it's very crucial, and I think I have the right audience to highlight this point. So when you are trying to deal with such various inescapably masculinist attitudes and discourses, right? Particular type of woman is freed and another is not freed, but then fantasized and exoticized, etc. You then need to go back to the scholars who are feminists, but are writing for the core theory. And that's very important. I mean, the feminist literature is extremely crucial, and we need to engage with that much more assertively than we are expected to, I think. And the other thing is engaging with the feminist scholars who are really good in tapping into the worlds of their research participants. So I engaged with, there are a couple of figures I really, really love that I ended up engaging with. Lisa Roffel. I'm going to drop names and I'm going to stop talking. Lisa Roffel, Sherry Ortner, and Catherine Ewing. I absolutely adore her. And my supervisor, luckily, was Henrietta Moore. And she's also one of those figures. So then the more you engage, and Laila Abulgot is an amazing, and Suat Joseph, of course, from the Middle East. And I always engage with Deniz Kandiyoti. I think she's somebody we should protect and always keep in our conversations, really. So the more you engage with these scholars, not just like simple citations, right? I'm speaking about like deep scholar engagements. You then realize what kind of a political academic fight they have been putting, and that's kind of conceptually allowing you to open up space for further analysis and deeper analysis. So I'm going to stop, sorry.
No, you were going great. Thanks, Sertaç. And thanks, Berna, for the question as well. And we can leave the floor to Ayşegül for her question. Yes,
Sertaç, it was amazing to listen to you and to continue to feel your passion, you know, engaging each one of the questions. Really, you bring so much life and energy into this research, and it's extremely interesting. So I have a lot of questions because you have inspired so many insights, but I will probably ask two of them. One is, of course, with the pandemic, you know, everyone's relationship with their body and working out our bodies and our desires have changed. So I was wondering, what happened in terms of your own questions and insights with this research during the pandemic? What is new in the pandemic for you? I don't know if you have continued to do this research. I would be curious about your own research participants, you know, how they have experienced the pandemic, not going to the gym, but then what happens, you know, through the screen at home or outside in the parks. And also, you know, with this Olympics, women in sports was a lot more in the agenda, in everyone's agenda, in the national agenda, not just the feminist agenda. And of course, Ebrar Karakurt and her non-heteronormative desire and her desire, and Dedim Olabilir is already, you know, pointing out, you know, I'm going with my own desires and I don't care what everyone else says. And of course, there's the desire to success. There's the desire to just be what I am and engage my body in the way that I want, and so on. So I was wondering how you read those discussions and this recent interest there. And maybe one final point, since, I mean, I love the way you talked about the feminist scholars and how you're engaging them and how you were honoring them. And really, yes, each one of them has opened new paths. And I love the way also you talked about this as a form of invisible resistance, being these desiring subjects. And there have also recently been interconnections between sports and feminist politics. So what about some of the more overt connections between them? There are women feminists who cycle, for instance, not just march, or feminists who dance, come together. And this, of course, last couple of years, we've seen a lot of those mass dancings and so on. So I would love to hear a bit more about how you perceive the changing forms of embodiment in the feminist movement too.
Thank you. I'm always excited when I see you speak, and thank you for your questions, Ayşegül Hocam. Pandemic has changed the way women were allowed to even be physically mobile. And especially for the women over a certain age because of the intense regulations. But when I think about how they were affected by various things in life, especially when it comes to those that I keep connections with. So yes, as I said, the project is about how women are manifesting their desiring selves, and they use spor merakı as a tool. So after I finish the fieldwork part and stay in contact with some of a good proportion of my interlocutors, one of the things I noticed was not all of them wanted to continue exercise as a lifestyle anyway. A good number of them, however, were using the exercise bit, the period that we met, as something that they could proceed on to something else. So there was this one particular woman, I speak about her in the book. She started exercising for various reasons, but also because of the life crisis she was dealing with in her life, and she needed to build herself again. And she started the journey with exercise. And now she's finishing 2 universities at the same time. So when you say what's happening in their lives, I immediately think about, oh, this woman wanted to get pregnant and she was going through IVF, and there were other 3 women actually who divorced their husbands, and one of them married to the second one. And then, you know, all these stories, so because they kind of needed to get out of all these temporal and spatial and relational elements that were imposed on them, they didn't have the mental space, temporal space, or actual spatial space to organize their lives for themselves. And they were using spor merakı to be able to connect with that side of themselves, right? But also at the same time, I was thinking about these other women who were telling me on, you know, the Facebook Messenger, how they were taking BIM bags so that they could take a walk and they wouldn't be stopped by the, you're familiar with this? Is it so common? I don't know how common this is, but I was being told about these things. They can't meet.
We all did it at some point. Eczane şeyleri, torbaları, yani, whatever, yeah.
So then, but they can't exercise, of course, in public parks, which is ridiculous if you ask me, because that's the best way to keep your immune system working and active and strong, etc. And also the third thing that was popping up in my head was how women over a certain age seem to be now really struggling with mental health issues because they were confined with their homes, especially those over 70. This woman whom I mentioned, or who said oyalanıyorum, she is now morbidly obese. Like she couldn't get out. And there are some sad stories about that as well, unfortunately. Yes, so that was another invisible resistance question, right? Oh, Ebrar Karakurt, before that, I find her story and her case extremely exciting. I didn't, of course, with my new project, and I'm kind of setting up team, changing my university. With all these changes taking place, I didn't have a chance to think about her scholarly, but I had a chance to observe a couple of things, like how individuals from various backgrounds seem to be strongly supporting her, which is exciting for the LGBTQ cause. But then at the same time, you read her responses to the haters, and how you realize and think about all these other, you know, non-normative individuals in Turkish history who used success as a survival mechanism, right? Like kind of Zeki Müren had to be admired. He couldn't be just a successful singer. He had to be the best one and the best one of the best. Otherwise, it's a kind of a survival issue. It's not just, it's beyond desires. It's kind of, it's a statement, but as I said, it's kind of a matter of survival. And they seem to have understood this, sadly. And so there is an element of violence deeply rooted in this. And I can't stop thinking about these aspects, right? Especially when it comes to non-ordinary, non-normative desires and forms of being that are attached to those desires. But one of the things I would find it very hypocritical if I didn't do research about the people I could connect with the best, like the ordinary women, I could obviously connect with them quite successfully. I was always questioning myself on this, you know, if I didn't do research about them, it would create another problematic issue, like the kind of, we create politics through our methodologies as well. But then when it comes to analysis, one of the things that was quite, again, to continue the kind of political idealism, I think, in my scholarship, was to turn this into an object of analysis, to turn this into ordinariness and even ordinary desires into an object of analysis. And just a quick example would be the kind of, I mean, the women I was speaking with, most of them were choosing women-only gyms, and there's something deeply normative, obviously, in that operation. But then how am I going to analyze this? Similar to the way I respond to Bernard's question, I suppose, I turned this into an object of analysis, and I kind of laid this out through using queer theory, which was, again, if we are trying to understand the normative operations, we have two options. Either we will be one of the normative people, which is what kinship studies have been doing for decades anyway, or we kind of turn this into a more productive way and contribute to the literature in more politically idealistic angle, I suppose, right? So how does this ordinaries are produced and consumed is best addressed through the theories already offered by the queer theory. So I was using analyzing mahremiyet, all this kind of language of mahremiyet and the culture of mahremiyet as an institution of intimacy, which is how heteronormativity is made intelligible, I suppose. And invisible resistance. I didn't think very closely on this actually, not scholarly anyway. I know we all enjoy, participating. It's the kind of embodied resistances. Even started with the kissing protest in Ankara. There was this, if you remember, I don't know, in 2013 it was, I guess, kind of these embodied resistances is kind of making us feel very liberated and can be much more powerful than the kind of, than the slogans sometimes. And slogans, there are times when slogans are more powerful, obviously. And I also immediately think about the times when there are these kind of embodied resistances. We see one of those theses, one of those kind of ordinary individuals joining us, right? And remember how it was like happening very regularly with the Gezi as well. We were like really celebrating. So there is something, all I can say, I guess, is there is something about these embodied resistances that is when it comes to discursive, like all these slogans we are using in the feminist marches, it might not be translated into the everyday lives of the ordinary individual or lay people, as we say in the UK, very easily. But when it comes to embodied resistances, it's much more easy for the broader public to connect with and to understand and join, I guess. And that's one of the points I feel like I can say. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sertaç. And are there any other questions, comments? I know that Sertaç is getting more and more excited and energetic while she was talking.
I don't know how this happened.
Yeah, I know she's like building up a momentum, but you may get really tired afterwards. So we don't want to tire too much, but you prepared such a concise talk, which gave away to such interesting questions and question and answer session that I just want to ask whether there are any other comments or questions. Okay, I think, it was great talk, very colorful, very nuanced and energetic. So I just wanted to thank Dr. Sertaç Sehlikoğlu again for this amazing talk, and for all the participants and for all the people who made the commentaries and questions. So thanks again. And last but not least, I would really recommend the book for the people who didn't read yet. Okay, thank you very much.
Well, I also want to thank you, Ayşecan, very much. And thank you for everyone who's asking questions. I did get energized, admittedly, but it's all thanks to the brilliant questions you've been asking. It's really stimulating. Thank you very much. It's one of the things an author would be most honored with, I guess. So thank you.
Thank you, Sertaç. It was amazing, really great work, and very, very inspiring.
Yes, and it was really energizing at the end of the semester where we're kind of tired, and so you reminded us the joy of research and how you connected to theories and how methodology is political and so on, which is a good message for the students here among the audience.
Oh, good to hear that. I can admit I had when the writing process was getting really tiring and really feeling dreadful, I had a little note attached to my laptop that said, you owe this to the women. To kind of keep me on my toes.
Yes, yeah, we owe all of this to all of our research to women, actually. So this is a great note to finish everything, I believe. Thank you very much for your participation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.